The evening started like any other at the famous steakhouse in Beverly Hills called Golden Cut. The restaurant was known for serving the best steaks in Los Angeles and was a favorite spot for many movie stars. The soft lights made the dark wood, walls glow, and quiet jazz music played in the background. The smell of grilled meat filled the air. Every table had a white cloth, shiny silverware, and a small candle. Clint Eastwood walked through the front door at exactly 7 o'clock. He wore a dark blue suit with no tie and moved with the same strength and purpose he showed in his films. Even at 94 years old, he stood tall and straight. The young woman at the front desk, Kathy Brown, smiled wide when she saw him. "Good evening, Mr. Eastwood," she said. "Your usual table is ready." Clint nodded and gave her a small smile. He didn't need to say much. His face, with its deep lines and sharp eyes, said everything. People in the restaurant noticed him right away. Some tried to act normal, but their eyes kept moving back to him. Others whispered to each other behind their menus. "That's him. That's really him," a woman said to her husband. "The man is a legend," the husband answered. Clint didn't seem to notice. He had been famous for so long that he hardly paid attention to how people acted around him. He followed Kathy to a corner table that gave him a good view of the whole restaurant, but kept him a little away from everyone else. "Will Mr. Simmons be joining you tonight?" Kathy asked as she pulled out his chair. "Yes, he's running late. Traffic on Sunset," Clint said in his low, rough voice. "I'll wait for him to order." Kathy placed a menu on the table and left. Clint looked around the restaurant. He knew most of the regular staff by now. There was Joe, the old bartender who had been working there for 30 years. Mary, the waitress who always remembered exactly how he liked his whiskey. And Sam, the manager who made sure Clint's visits were always perfect. But tonight, Clint noticed someone new. A young man, maybe 25 years old, was serving tables on the other side of the room. He had short brown hair and moved quickly between tables. The young man seemed nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he poured water for a group of businessmen. Clint watched him for a while, remembering his own early days working odd jobs before he became an actor. The front door opened again, and Frank Simmons walked in. Frank was a film producer who had worked with Clint on 3 movies. He was shorter than Clint, with gray hair and round glasses. He smiled and waved when he saw his friend. "Sorry I'm late," Frank said as he sat down. "The traffic was terrible." "No problem," Clint said. "I wasn't waiting long." The 2 men started talking about a new movie project. Frank wanted Clint to direct it, and Clint was interested but not sure if he wanted to commit to another big project at his age. As they talked, Sam, the manager, walked over to their table. "Good evening, Mr. Eastwood, Mr. Simmons," Sam said with a big smile. "It's wonderful to see you both again. I wanted to let you know that Paul, your usual waiter, called in sick tonight, so I've assigned Peter to your table. He's new, but he's very good." Sam pointed to the young man Clint had noticed earlier. Peter was now walking toward their table, trying hard to look confident. Clint could see a small drop of sweat on the young man's forehead. "That's fine, Sam," Clint said. "We all have to start somewhere." Sam nodded and left. Peter reached the table and took a deep breath. "Good evening, gentlemen," Peter said, his voice only shaking a little. "My name is Peter Grant, and I'll be your server tonight. Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Whiskey, neat," Clint said. "Macallan 18 if you have it." "The same for me," Frank added. Peter wrote down their orders and hurried to the bar. Clint watched him go. "New kid seems nervous," Frank said. "He'll be fine," Clint replied. "Just needs some confidence." Peter returned a few minutes later with their drinks. His hands were steadier now as he placed the glasses on the table. "Are you ready to order, or do you need more time?" Peter asked. "I'll have the ribeye, medium rare," Clint said. "No sauce on the side, just the meat." "And I'll have the filet mignon, also medium rare," Frank said, "with the mushroom sauce." Peter wrote down their orders carefully. "Would you like any appetizers?" "The crab cakes are excellent tonight." Clint and Frank looked at each other. "Why not?" Frank said. "Let's have the crab cakes." "Excellent choice," Peter said, sounding more confident. "I'll put those orders in right away." As Peter walked toward the kitchen, A commotion started at the front of the restaurant. The door had opened, and a man walked in who caught everyone's attention. He wore a tight black t-shirt, black pants, and round sunglasses even though it was nighttime. His black hair was pulled back, and his arms were covered in tattoos. It was Nusret Gökçe, known to the world as Salt Bay, the famous Turkish chef, who had become an internet sensation for his unique way of seasoning meat. "Is that who I think it is?" Frank asked, turning in his chair. "Looks like it," Clint said, watching as Salt Bay greeted Sam with a hug. Salt Bay was in Los Angeles to open a new restaurant. He had come to Golden Cut to meet the head chef, who was an old friend. Everyone in the restaurant was watching him now, taking pictures with their phones and whispering excitedly. In the kitchen, Peter was giving the chef their orders when he heard about the famous visitor. "Salt Bay is here? Tonight of all nights?" Peter said to himself. "When I'm serving Clint Eastwood?" Peter felt his nerves returning. He had only been working at Golden Cut for 2 weeks. This was his first job at a high-end restaurant, and now he had to serve one of the biggest movie stars in history on the same night a famous chef was visiting. He took several deep breaths and tried to remember everything he had learned in training. Back at the table, Clint and Frank had returned to their conversation about the movie project. The crab cakes arrived, delivered by Peter, who was now visibly sweating. "Here are your crab cakes, gentlemen," Peter said, placing the plate in the center of the table. "Your steaks will be ready shortly." As Peter turned to leave, he bumped into another server, almost causing them both to fall. Peter caught himself on the edge of the table, making the water glasses shake. Nothing spilled, but Peter's face turned bright red. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Eastwood," he said quickly. Clint just nodded. "No harm done," he said in his calm, steady voice. Peter hurried away, embarrassed. In the kitchen, he splashed cold water on his face and tried to pull himself together. "You need to calm down," the head chef told him. "They're just people. Famous people, but still just people." "I know," Peter said. "But it's Clint Eastwood, and now Salt Bay is here too." "Focus on one table at a time," the chef advised. "The steaks are almost ready." On the other side of the restaurant, Salt Bay was greeting fans and taking pictures. He moved with style and confidence, making everyone smile. Clint watched him with interest. He respected people who were good at their craft, whatever it might be. The steaks arrived at Clint and Frank's table. Peter had calmed down a bit and managed to place the plates without any accidents. "Ribeye, medium rare for Mr. Eastwood," Peter said, "and filet mignon with mushroom sauce for Mr. Simmons. Can I get you anything else?" "This looks good," Clint said, looking at his steak. "Yes, thank you," Frank added. Peter nodded and started to turn away. Then he remembered something his trainer had told him about providing extra service to important guests. Without thinking, he reached for the pepper mill he carried and turned back to the table. "Some fresh ground pepper for your steak, Mr. Eastwood?" he asked, holding the mill over Clint's plate. Before Clint could answer, Peter started grinding the pepper. Black specks fell onto the perfectly cooked meat. Clint's eyes narrowed slightly. "I didn't ask for pepper," he said quietly. Peter froze. His hand stopped mid-turn. He suddenly remembered that Clint had specifically ordered just the meat, no extras, and now he had ruined it. "I'm so sorry," Peter said, his voice almost a whisper. "I can take it back and have them make a new one." The restaurant seemed to go quiet. Everyone was looking at their table now. Peter felt like he might faint, and that was when Salt Bay noticed what was happening across the room. Peter stood frozen beside Clint Eastwood's table, the pepper mill still in his shaking hand. Black specks covered the perfect ribeye steak that Clint had ordered with no seasoning. The young waiter's face had turned pale, and sweat formed on his forehead. Everyone in the Golden Cut Steakhouse seemed to be watching now. The soft jazz music still played, but all conversation had stopped. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Eastwood," Peter said again, his voice barely a whisper. "I can take it back to the kitchen, right away." Clint looked at his steak, then up at Peter. His blue eyes were calm but intense. When he spoke, his voice was low and gravelly. "Son, When a customer tells you how they want their food, that's how they want it, Clint said. Not how you think they should have it. Frank Simmons, sitting across from Clint, tried to help the situation. It's just a little pepper, Clint. No big deal. But Peter knew it was a big deal. In a high-end restaurant like Golden Cut, getting an order wrong for a regular customer was bad. Getting it wrong for Clint Eastwood was a disaster. Peter had only been working there for 2 weeks, and he was sure he would be fired by the end of the night. I'll have them make you a new steak right away, sir, Peter said, reaching for the plate. Clint raised his hand to stop him. Leave it. I'll eat it as is. Peter nodded, still feeling terrible. Can I get you anything else, sir? Just some peace and quiet to enjoy my meal, Clint said, picking up his knife and fork. Peter backed away from the table, bumping into another chair as he did. He hurried toward the kitchen, feeling like everyone in the restaurant was staring at him. Once he was through the swinging doors, he leaned against the wall and took deep breaths. The head chef, Greg Wilson, looked up from the grill. What's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, Peter said. I just put pepper on Clint Eastwood's steak after he ordered it plain. Greg's eyes widened. You did what? Are you trying to get fired on purpose? It was an accident, Peter said. I wasn't thinking, it's just habit to offer pepper. Well, your habit might cost you your job, Greg said, turning back to the grill. Sam is not going to be happy. As if on cue, Sam, the restaurant manager, pushed through the kitchen doors. His face was serious as he walked straight to Peter. What happened out there? Sam asked. Mrs. Turner at table 9 said you almost had a fight with Clint Eastwood. It wasn't a fight, Peter said quickly. I accidentally put pepper on his steak when he wanted it plain. He seemed upset, but he said he would eat it anyway. Sam rubbed his forehead. Peter, this is exactly why we have training. You have to listen to the customers, especially the VIPs. Mr. Eastwood has been coming here for years. He always orders. The same thing, ribeye, medium rare, no seasoning. I know, I'm sorry, Peter said. Should I go back and apologize again? No, Sam said firmly. Leave him alone for now. Let him enjoy his meal in peace. I'll go check on him in a few minutes and smooth things over. Peter nodded, feeling miserable. He had wanted this job so badly. The tips at Golden Cut were excellent, and working there could open doors to even better restaurants in the future. Now, because of one mistake, he might lose everything. Meanwhile, back in the dining room, Clint and Frank were eating their steaks. Clint cut a piece of his ribeye and chewed it slowly. How is it? Frank asked. Too much pepper? Clint shrugged. It's fine, just not what I ordered. Across the restaurant, Salt Bae was still greeting fans and taking pictures. He moved with style and energy, making everyone around him smile. But he had noticed the small drama at Clint Eastwood's table. Salt Bae had a special respect for the Hollywood legend. He had grown up watching Eastwood's movies in Turkey, especially the westerns where Eastwood played tough cowboys. After finishing with his fans, Salt Bae spoke quietly to his friend, the head chef Greg, who had come out of the kitchen to say hello. What happened with Eastwood? Salt Bae asked, nodding toward Clint's table. Greg sighed. New waiter put pepper on his steak when he didn't want any. Kid's probably going to lose his job over it. Salt Bae raised an eyebrow. Over some pepper? That seems harsh. It's not just the pepper, Greg explained. It's about listening to the customer, especially when that customer is Clint Eastwood. Salt Bae nodded thoughtfully, watching as Clint continued to eat his steak without much enjoyment. An idea began to form in his mind. He was famous for his own special way of seasoning steaks. People all over the world knew his salt sprinkling technique. Maybe he could turn this awkward situation into something special. Back in the kitchen, Peter was trying to focus on his other tables. He had 3 other groups to serve, and he couldn't let his mistake with Clint Eastwood affect his work for them. But his hands were still shaking, and he kept dropping things and forgetting orders. Pull yourself together, Mary, one of the older waitresses told him. One mistake doesn't end your career. This one might, Peter said, picking up drinks for table 12. Mary shook her head. Listen, we've all made mistakes. Last year I spilled red wine on a woman wearing a white dress that probably cost more than I make in a month. I still have my job. But that was an accident, Peter said. I wasn't listening to what the customer wanted, that's worse. Before Mary could answer, Sam came back into the kitchen looking worried. Peter, Mr. Eastwood wants to see you, Sam said. Peter felt his heart sink. Is he going to complain about me? I don't know, Sam said. But when Clint Eastwood asks to see someone, they go. So finish with table 12 and then go see what he wants. Peter nodded, his mouth dry. He delivered the drinks to table 12, took their food order, and then slowly walked back toward Clint's table. His legs felt heavy, like he was walking, to his own execution. Clint and Frank had finished their steaks. Their plates were mostly empty, though Clint had left some of his ribeye uneaten. When he saw Peter approaching, Clint looked up with his steady gaze. You wanted to see me, Mr. Eastwood? Peter asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Clint nodded. What's your name, son? Peter Grant, sir. How long have you been working here, Peter? 2 weeks, sir. Clint nodded again, as if this explained everything. First job at a place like this? Yes, sir, Peter admitted. I worked at a diner before this, and before that I was in college. Clint took a sip of his whiskey. Everyone makes mistakes, Peter. The question is, what do you learn from them? Peter swallowed hard. Was Clint Eastwood giving him advice? I learned to listen better, sir, to what the customer actually wants, not what I think they want. Good, Clint said. That's a lesson that applies to more than just waiting tables. Peter felt a small wave of relief. Maybe Clint wasn't going to complain about him after all. But then he noticed Salt Bae walking toward their table, and his anxiety returned. The famous chef moved with confidence, his sunglasses still on even, in the dim restaurant light. Salt Bae stopped at their table and gave a small bow to Clint. Mr. Eastwood, he said with his Turkish accent, it is an honor to meet you. I am Nusret, but people call me Salt Bae. Clint extended his hand and Salt Bae shook it firmly. I know who you are, Clint said. My granddaughter showed me videos of you on her phone. Salt Bae smiled. I am a big fan of your movies, especially the westerns. In my country, you are very famous. Thank you, Clint said simply. Salt Bae looked at Clint's plate, noticing the uneaten portion of steak. I see you did not finish your ribeye. Was it not to your liking? Clint glanced at Peter, who looked like he wanted to disappear. It wasn't what I ordered, but it was fine. Salt Bae's smile grew wider. Perhaps you would allow me to prepare a steak for you? My special way? No charge, of course, it would be my honor. The restaurant had gone quiet again. Everyone was watching the interaction between the two famous men. Peter stood to the side, unsure what to do. Was Salt Bae trying to help him or make the situation worse? Clint looked at Salt Bae for a long moment, then at his friend Frank, who nodded encouragingly. Finally, Clint shrugged his shoulders. Why not? I'm still a little hungry. Salt Bae clapped his hands together once. Excellent. I will need a new ribeye and some space to work. Perhaps we could move to a larger table. Sam, who had been watching nervously from nearby, rushed over. We can set up the center table for you, Mr. Gökçe. It will give you plenty of room. Perfect, Salt Bae said. He turned to Peter. And you, young man, will assist me. Yes? Peter looked surprised. Me? But Yes, you, Salt Bae interrupted. You will learn something new today. Clint stood up, a slight smile on his face. This should be interesting. The center of the Golden Cut restaurant was quickly transformed. Staff moved tables aside to create an open space. They set up a special table with a small cooking station. People from other tables stood up to get a better view. Some took out their phones to record what was about to happen. This was not a normal night at the fancy steakhouse. Salt Bae removed his sunglasses and handed them to Peter. Hold these for me, he said with a smile. Then he took off his watch and rolled up, his sleeves showing his muscular arms covered in tattoos. He looked like a boxer preparing for a fight. Greg, the head chef, came out from the kitchen carrying a large tray. On it was a perfect raw ribeye steak, several small bowls of different salts and spices, and a set of sharp knives. Greg placed the tray on the table and nodded to Salt Bae. The best cut we have. Greg said. Good luck. Salt Bae picked up one of the knives and tested its edge with his thumb. This will do, he said. He looked at Peter, who was standing nervously to the side, still holding the sunglasses. Come closer, young man, you need to see this. Peter moved closer to the table. Clint and Frank had been given seats with a good view of the action. Clint sat with his arms crossed, watching everything with interest. The restaurant was completely silent now as everyone waited for the show to begin. Tonight, Salt Bae announced, in a loud voice, I will prepare a special steak for Mr. Clint Eastwood, one of the greatest actors in history, and I will teach our young friend Peter something about seasoning. Peter felt his face turn red as everyone looked at him. This was not how he had expected his night to go. First, he had made a terrible mistake with Clint Eastwood's order. Now he was part of a public demonstration by the world-famous Salt Bae. His head was spinning. Salt Bae picked up the raw steak with his bare hands. He held it up for everyone to see. The first rule of cooking a perfect steak, he said, is to start with the best meat. This is a prime ribeye, aged for 30 days. Feel the marbling. He handed the steak to Peter. Peter took the steak, surprised by its weight. The meat was cold and slightly sticky in his hands. He could see the thin lines of white fat running through the deep red meat. Now give it to Mr. Eastwood, Salt Bae instructed. Let him feel the quality. Peter walked over to Clint and held out the steak. Clint raised an eyebrow but took the meat in his hands. He pressed it with his fingers and nodded. Good meat, Clint said, handing it back to Peter, who returned it to Salt Bae. Salt Bae placed the steak on a cutting board. With quick, precise movements, he began to cut it. His knife moved so fast it was almost a blur. He trimmed excess fat and shaped the meat perfectly. Everyone watched in amazement. The second rule, Salt Bae said as he worked, is to respect the meat. Cut with purpose. Every slice matters. When he finished cutting, Salt Bae picked up the steak again and placed it on a hot grill that had been set up at the table. The meat sizzled loudly, and a delicious smell filled the air. Salt Bae pressed down on the steak with a flat metal tool, creating even more sizzling sounds. The third rule, he continued, is to cook with passion. Feel the heat. Listen to the meat. It will tell you when it's ready. After a few minutes, Salt Bae flipped the steak. The side that had been on the grill was now a perfect brown color with beautiful grill marks. People in the restaurant clapped and cheered. Even Clint seemed impressed, leaning forward to get a better look. Now comes the most important part, Salt Bae said, looking directly at Peter. The seasoning, this is where you made your mistake, yes? Peter nodded, embarrassed. Yes, Mr. Eastwood asked for no seasoning, but I put pepper on his steak anyway. And why did you do this? Salt Bae asked. Peter thought for a moment. I guess because I'm used to seasoning all the steaks. It's what I was taught to do at my old job. I didn't really listen to what Mr. Eastwood wanted. Salt Bae nodded. This is a common mistake. We think we know better than the customer, but the customer knows what they like. Our job is to give them exactly that. He turned to Clint. Mr. Eastwood, why do you prefer your steak with no seasoning? Clint shifted in his chair. He wasn't used to being asked questions in public, but after a moment he answered. I like to taste the meat itself. Nothing covering up the natural flavor. A pure experience, Salt Bae said. I respect that. He turned back to the steak and flipped it again. But tonight, if you will permit me, I would like to show you my special way of seasoning. It will not cover the taste of the meat. It will enhance it. Clint nodded. Go ahead. Show us what you can do. Salt Bae smiled. The steak was now cooked to a perfect medium rare. He removed it from the grill and placed it on a wooden board. He let it rest for a minute, explaining to everyone that this was necessary to keep the juices inside the meat. Now, he said, picking up a small bowl of salt. For the final touch. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Salt Bae's famous salt sprinkle had been viewed millions of times online. He held the steak on his knife and raised his arm high. He took a pinch of salt between his fingers and held it about, a foot above his forearm. The salt must fall from a height, he explained. This way it spreads evenly over the meat. With a dramatic flourish, Salt Bae dropped the salt onto his forearm. It bounced off his skin and scattered over the steak in a perfect pattern. The restaurant erupted in applause. People cheered and took pictures. Even the kitchen staff who had come out to watch were clapping. Salt Bae did this 2 more times, each with the same dramatic flair. Then he sliced the steak into thin pieces, revealing the perfect pink center. He arranged the slices on a plate and added a few drops of olive oil. When he was finished, he held up the plate for everyone to see. "For you, Mr. Eastwood," Salt Bae said, walking over to Clint's table and placing the plate in front of him. "Please try it." The restaurant went quiet again as everyone waited for Clint's reaction. The famous actor picked up his fork and knife and cut a small piece of the steak. He put it in his mouth and chewed slowly. His face gave nothing away. After what seemed like a very long time, Clint swallowed and looked up at Salt Bae. "That," he said in his gravelly voice, "is a damn good steak." The tension in the room broke. People cheered and clapped again. Salt Bae smiled widely and bowed slightly to Clint. "Thank you, sir. It is an honor." Peter, still standing to the side holding Salt Bae's sunglasses, felt a wave of relief wash over him. Maybe this night wasn't going to end in disaster after all. Salt Bae motioned for him to come closer. "You see, Peter," Salt Bae said, putting his hand on the young waiter's shoulder. "Seasoning is an art, but it is also about respect. Respect for the food and respect for the person who will eat it. Never forget this." Peter nodded. "I won't. Thank you." Salt Bae turned to the crowd in the restaurant. "Thank you all for watching. Now please, return to your meals." He put his sunglasses back on and shook Clint's hand one more time. As people returned to their tables, still talking excitedly about what they had just seen, Sam pulled Peter aside. "Well," Sam said, "that was certainly interesting. You got lucky. Tonight, Peter, Salt Bae turned your mistake into a show and Mr. Eastwood seems happy with the outcome. Does this mean I still have a job?" Peter asked nervously. Sam sighed. "Yes, you still have a job, but no more mistakes like that, understand? Next time, listen carefully to what the customer wants." "I will," Peter promised. "I've learned my lesson." Across the room, Clint and Frank were enjoying the rest of the steak that Salt Bae had prepared. Frank looked amused by the whole situation. "Only you, Clint," Frank said, shaking his head. "Only you could turn a pepper mistake into a private show by Salt Bae." Clint shrugged. "I didn't plan it, but it was worth it. This steak is better than anything I've had here before." "So does this mean you'll start ordering your steaks with salt now?" Frank asked. Clint thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I still like them plain, but once in a while it's good to try something new." At that moment, a woman approached their table. She was in her 40s, well-dressed, with short blonde hair. "Excuse me, Mr. Eastwood," she said. "I'm Diane Kelly from Hollywood Reporter. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about what just happened? It would make a great story." Clint looked at her, then at the steak, then at Peter, who was watching from across the room. "Sure," he said. "Why not? It's not every day you get seasoned by a waiter and saved by Salt Bae." The next morning, Diane Kelly's story about Clint Eastwood, Salt Bae, and the nervous waiter was all over the internet. The headline read, "Clint Eastwood got seasoned by a waiter at Steakhouse until Salt Bae stepped in." People shared the story on social media, and soon it was trending. Everyone was talking about what happened at the Golden Cut restaurant. Peter Grant woke up to find his phone buzzing with messages. Friends and family had seen the story and recognized his name. Some of the messages were supportive, telling him not to worry. Others teased him about his mistake. Peter groaned and pulled the blanket over his head. He wasn't sure if he was famous or infamous now, but either way, he didn't like the attention. After a few minutes, Peter got out of bed and checked the time. It was 10:30 a.m. He had to be at work by 4 p.m. for the dinner shift. He wondered how people at the restaurant would treat him after last night. Would they laugh at him? Would the other waiters make jokes about pepper? Peter sighed and went to make coffee. It was going to be a long day. Meanwhile, across town in a large house in Bel Air, Clint Eastwood was reading the newspaper article about last night's events. He sat in his living room, a cup of black coffee on the table beside him. The morning sun streamed through the windows, lighting up the room. Clint didn't use social media, so he hadn't seen how big the story had become online. But the newspaper article was detailed, describing how Peter had mistakenly peppered his steak and how Salt Bae had saved the day with his dramatic cooking demonstration. The phone rang, and Clint answered it. It was his daughter calling to ask if the story was true. Yes, it happened pretty much like the article says, Clint told her in his low, gravelly voice, though they made it sound more dramatic than it was. Dad, it's all over the internet, his daughter said. There are even videos of Salt Bae cooking for you. People are calling it the Steak Summit. Clint chuckled. Steak Summit? That's ridiculous. It was just dinner. Well, people love it. Especially the part where you gave advice to the waiter. They're calling you a class act for not getting angry about the pepper. Clint shook his head, though his daughter couldn't see it over the phone. No point getting angry over something so small. The kid made a mistake, happens to everyone. After talking with his daughter for a few more minutes, Clint hung up the phone and went back to reading the newspaper. He wasn't bothered by the attention. After so many years in Hollywood, he was used to it, but he did feel a little sorry for the young waiter, Peter. The kid was probably having a hard time with all this unexpected publicity. At the same time, in a luxury hotel suite, Salt Bae was enjoying the attention. He sat on a couch scrolling through his phone, looking at all the new videos and articles about him. His signature salt-sprinkling move had gone viral again, this time with the added interest of Clint Eastwood being involved. Salt Bae smiled, to himself. This was great publicity for his new restaurant, which was opening in Los Angeles next week. One of Salt Bae's assistants came into the room. Sir, you have many requests for interviews today. Television, radio, online. Everyone wants to hear about last night with Clint Eastwood. Salt Bae nodded. I will do some, but not all. And I want to invite the waiter, Peter, to the opening of my new restaurant. Can you find him? Yes, sir, the assistant said. I'll contact the Golden Cut restaurant right away. Salt Bae went back to his phone. He had received a message from his mother in Turkey, who had seen the news. She was proud of him for meeting Clint Eastwood, who was one of her favorite actors. Salt Bae sent her a smiling emoji and promised to tell her all about it when he called her later. Back at his small apartment, Peter was getting ready for work. He was nervous about facing his co-workers and the restaurant customers. Would people recognize him? Would they ask him about Clint Eastwood and Salt Bae? Peter wasn't good with attention. He had become a waiter because he needed money while he figured out what to do with his life, not because he wanted to be in the spotlight. Peter's phone rang. It was Sam, the manager from Golden Cut. Peter, I'm glad I caught you, Sam said. I wanted to talk to you before you come in for your shift today. Peter's heart sank. Was he going to be fired after all? Yes, Sam, what is it? First, don't worry. You still have your job, Sam said, as if reading Peter's mind. But things are a bit crazy here today. We've had hundreds of calls for reservations. Everyone wants to eat where Clint Eastwood and Salt Bae had their steak summit. Sam chuckled at the nickname. Oh, Peter said, not sure how to respond. And many of them are asking if you'll be their waiter, Sam continued. You've become something of a celebrity overnight. Peter groaned. I don't want to be a celebrity, Sam. I just want to do my job. I understand, Sam said, but this is good for business, so try to be patient with the customers. They might ask for pictures or autographs. Autographs? Peter couldn't believe what he was hearing. Why would anyone want my autograph? Welcome to Los Angeles, Sam said with a laugh. Oh, and one more thing. Salt Bae's assistant called. He wants to invite you to the opening of his new restaurant next week. VIP treatment. You interested? Peter sat down on his couch, feeling overwhelmed. I guess so. I mean, yes, that sounds nice. Good. I'll pass along your contact information, Sam said. See you at 4. After hanging up, Peter stared at his phone in disbelief. How had his life changed so much in less than 24 hours? Yesterday, He was just a new waiter at a fancy restaurant, nervous about serving important customers. Today, he was getting invited to VIP events and being asked for autographs. All because he made a mistake with Clint Eastwood's steak. It was crazy. Later that afternoon, Peter arrived at the Golden Cut restaurant for his shift. As soon as he walked through the door, he knew things were different. The restaurant was busier than he had ever seen it, even though it was only 4 p.m. Every table was full and there was a line of people waiting to be seated. When Peter walked to the back to put on his uniform, several of the other staff members clapped and cheered. "There he is," called out Mary, the older waitress who had tried to comfort him last night. The man who seasoned Clint Eastwood and lived. "To tell the tale." Peter's face turned red. "Please don't," he said. "It's embarrassing enough already." "Embrace it, kid," said Joe, the bartender. "This kind of fame doesn't last long in this town. Enjoy it while it lasts." Peter changed into his uniform and tied on his apron. Sam came over and handed him a section assignment. "I've put you in section 3 tonight," Sam said. "It's the quietest section, away from the main floor. Thought you might prefer that." "Thanks, Sam," Peter said gratefully. "I appreciate it." But as Peter started his shift, he quickly realized that there was no quiet section tonight. Every table wanted to talk to him, ask him questions about Clint Eastwood and Salt Bay, and take pictures with him. Peter tried to be polite, but he felt uncomfortable with all the attention. He just wanted to take orders and serve food like a normal waiter. After a particularly busy hour, Peter took a short break in the kitchen. He was leaning against the wall, eyes closed, trying to gather his energy for the rest of the shift, when Greg, the head chef, came over. "Tough night?" Greg asked. Peter opened his eyes. "You have no idea. Everyone wants to talk about last night. I must have told the story 50 times already." Greg nodded. "Fame is a strange thing. It can come from the most unexpected places." He paused, then added, "But you know what impresses me? You're still here doing your job. You didn't call in sick or quit. That shows character." Peter hadn't thought of it that way. "Thanks, Greg. I just hope things get back to normal soon." Greg laughed. "Normal in Los Angeles? Good luck with that." He patted Peter on the shoulder and went back to the grill. As Peter prepared to go back to the dining room, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was another news story about last night, but this one had a different angle. The headline read, "Clint Eastwood shows class. Why his response to waiter's mistake is a lesson for everyone." Peter clicked on the article and read it quickly. It talked about how Clint Eastwood could have gotten angry about the peppered steak, could have demanded the waiter be fired, could have made a scene. But instead, he stayed calm, accepted the situation, and even gave Peter advice afterward. The article praised Eastwood's patience and understanding. As Peter put his phone away and headed back to work, he thought about how differently the night could have gone. If Clint Eastwood had reacted badly, Peter might have lost his job. If Salt Bay hadn't stepped in with his dramatic cooking demonstration, the story might never have made the news. Small moments and decisions had changed everything. Peter took a deep breath and pushed through the kitchen doors back into the busy dining room. He had more tables to serve, more orders to take, more stories to tell, but he carried with him a new understanding, one that both Clint Eastwood and Salt Bay had taught him in their own ways. Mistakes happen to everyone, but it's how you respond to them that matters. 1 week had passed since the famous steak summit at Golden Cut restaurant. The story had started to fade from the news as newer celebrity stories took its place. For Peter Grant, life was slowly returning to normal. Customers at the restaurant still occasionally asked him about Clint Eastwood and Salt Bay, but the constant attention had died down. Peter was grateful for this. He could focus on being a good waiter again, rather than retelling the same story over and over. Tonight was a special night, though. It was the grand opening of Salt Bay's new restaurant in Los Angeles called Salt, and Peter had been invited as a VIP guest. He stood in front of his bathroom mirror adjusting his tie. He had bought a new suit for the occasion, spending more than he should have on his waiter's salary. But this was a once-in-a-lifetime event, and he wanted to look his best. Peter's phone buzzed with a text message from Mary, the older waitress from Golden Cut. "Good luck tonight, celebrity. The message read, "Don't forget us little people when you're hanging out with the stars." Peter smiled and texted back a quick thank you. Across town, Salt Bae was overseeing last-minute preparations for his restaurant opening. He moved through the kitchen, checking dishes and giving instructions to his staff. Everything had to be perfect. This was his first restaurant in Los Angeles, and many important people would be there tonight. He had invited actors, musicians, sports stars, and of course Clint Eastwood. Salt Bae wasn't sure if Eastwood would come. The famous actor was known for being private and didn't often attend public events like restaurant openings, but Salt Bae had sent a personal invitation, thanking Eastwood for being part of the moment that had given them both so much publicity. It would be an honor if Eastwood showed up, but Salt Bae wasn't counting on it. In his home in Bel Air, Clint Eastwood was indeed looking at the invitation from Salt Bae. He rarely went to these kinds of events anymore. At his age, he preferred quiet evenings at home or small dinners with close friends. But there was something about this invitation that made him consider it. Perhaps it was the memory of that perfectly cooked steak, or the young waiter who had been so nervous about his mistake. Clint put the invitation down and went to his closet to find a suit. As the evening arrived, Salt Bae's new restaurant was lit up and ready for the grand opening. Red carpets had been laid out front, and photographers lined the entrance, ready to take pictures of the arriving celebrities. Security guards kept the growing crowd of onlookers behind ropes on either side of the carpet. Peter arrived in a taxi, feeling out of place among the fancy cars dropping off well-known faces. He gave his name to a security guard, who checked a list and then nodded. "Go right ahead, Mr. Grant," the guard said. "Mr. Gokchi is expecting you." Peter walked down the red carpet, trying to ignore the cameras flashing around him. No one recognized him, of course. He wasn't a celebrity, just a waiter who had been in the right place at the wrong time. Or maybe it was the wrong place at the right time. Peter wasn't sure anymore. Inside the restaurant, everything was elegant and modern. The walls were decorated, with pictures of Salt Bae in his signature pose sprinkling salt. The tables were set with fine china and crystal glasses. The lighting was dim but warm, creating a cozy atmosphere despite the large space. Salt Bae spotted Peter and walked over to greet him. "Peter, my friend, welcome to Salt," he said, giving Peter a hug. "Come, I have a special table for you." Salt Bae led Peter to a table near the front of the restaurant, where guests could see the area where Salt Bae would perform his famous salt sprinkling technique later in the evening. There were place cards on the table, and Peter was surprised to see his name there, along with Mr. Clint Eastwood and Mr. Frank Simmons. "You've put me at Clint Eastwood's table?" Peter asked, feeling nervous again. Salt Bae nodded. "Yes, you are part of the story now. Without you, there is no Steak Summit." Peter wasn't sure if this was a good thing. "Do you think he'll really come?" "We will see," Salt Bae said with a smile. "Now please sit. Enjoy some champagne. The show will begin soon." As the restaurant filled with guests, Peter sat at his table sipping champagne and watching the famous people arrive. He recognized movie stars, musicians, and even some politicians. They all greeted Salt Bae warmly, congratulating him on his new restaurant. Just as the event was about to officially start, there was a stir near the entrance. Peter looked up to see Clint Eastwood walking in, accompanied by Frank Simmons. The room went quiet for a moment, then burst into applause. Clint nodded to the crowd but didn't smile. He looked the same as he had at Golden Cut, wearing a simple, dark suit with no tie. Salt Bae rushed over to greet Clint, shaking his hand and thanking him for coming. Clint said something that Peter couldn't hear, and Salt Bae laughed. Then, to Peter's horror, Salt Bae pointed in his direction. Clint looked over, saw Peter, and started walking toward the table. Peter stood up quickly, almost knocking over his champagne glass. His heart was racing. What should he say? Should he apologize again for the pepper incident? Should he act casual, like they were old friends? Before Peter could decide, Clint was there, standing in front of him. "Hello, Peter," Clint said in his gravelly voice. "Nice to see you again." "Hello, Mr. Eastwood," Peter managed to say. "Thank you for coming tonight." Clint sat down at the table, and Frank took the seat beside him. "Wouldn't miss it," Clint said. "Not every day you get invited to a restaurant opening because you complained about pepper." Peter wasn't sure if Clint was joking or not. His face was hard to read. But Frank was smiling, so Peter relaxed a little. "Has the fame been hard on you, kid?" Frank asked Peter. Peter shrugged. "It's been strange. People at the restaurant want to take pictures with me. A couple of cooking shows asked me to be a guest. I said no to those." "Smart," Clint said. "Fame is overrated." The evening continued with speeches and demonstrations. Salt Bae gave a speech thanking everyone for coming, especially Clint Eastwood and his friend Peter, the waiter who started it all. People applauded, and Peter felt his face turn red again. Then came the main event, Salt Bae's cooking demonstration. Just like at Golden Cut, he prepared steaks with dramatic flair, cutting the meat with precise movements and, of course, sprinkling salt in his famous style. The crowd loved it, taking videos with their phones and cheering each time the salt scattered perfectly over a steak. After the demonstration, Salt Bae prepared special steaks for Clint, Frank, and Peter. When he brought them to the table, he made a small show of asking Clint, "Would you like pepper on your steak, Mr. Eastwood?" The room went quiet, waiting for Clint's response. The famous actor looked at Salt Bae, then at Peter, then back at Salt Bae. Then, to everyone's surprise, Clint smiled. "Yes," he said, "I think I'll try it with pepper tonight." The room burst into laughter and applause. Salt Bae grinned and ground fresh pepper over Clint's steak with a flourish. Peter couldn't believe what he was seeing. Clint Eastwood was actually making a joke about the pepper incident. As they ate their steaks, which were perfectly cooked and seasoned, Clint turned to Peter. "So, what's next for you, young man? Still planning to be a waiter?" Peter thought about the question. "I'm not sure. I was only waiting tables while I figured out what I really want to do." "And what's that?" Clint asked. Peter hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I've always wanted to write. Screenplays, actually. That's why I came to Los Angeles." Clint nodded. "Writing's good. Hard work, but good. Have you written anything yet?" Frank asked, suddenly interested. "Just a few short scripts," Peter admitted. "Nothing good enough to show anyone." Frank pulled out a business card and handed it to Peter. "Send me what you've got. I'm always looking for new writers." Peter stared at the card in shock. Frank Simmons, a successful film producer, was asking to read his scripts? This couldn't be real. "Thank you," Peter said, carefully putting the card in his pocket. "I will." As the evening came to an end, Salt Bae joined them at the table for a final toast. He raised his glass. To new friendships, new opportunities, and the perfect amount of seasoning. They all clinked glasses and drank. Peter looked around the table at Salt Bae, the internet sensation chef, Frank Simmons, the Hollywood producer, and Clint Eastwood, the legendary actor. A week ago, he had been just another struggling waiter in Los Angeles, making a big mistake with a famous customer's order. Now he was sitting with these successful men being offered a chance to follow his dream. All because he put pepper on a steak. Life was strange that way. Sometimes the biggest opportunities came from the smallest mistakes. As Peter left the restaurant that night with Frank's business card in his pocket and a promise to email his scripts, he thought about what Clint had said at Golden Cut. Everyone makes mistakes. The question is, what do you learn from them? Peter had learned more than he ever expected. He had learned about listening to what people want, about handling pressure, about responding to mistakes with grace. And most importantly, he had learned that sometimes the worst moment of your life can lead to the best opportunity you've ever had. The next day, Peter sat down at his computer and started writing a new screenplay. Its title, The Steak Summit.